Great, let's get this started. Does everyone hear me okay?
Yes, very clear, please.
Great, awesome. Okay, let's do a introduction. My name is Johnny Chak. I'm the community lead at Solv Protocol and the moderator of this community call. Today, we're going to be spending some time talking about the ex machina of Web3 digital assets. Now, for those who've seen the movie as I have and are expecting the same level of PG-13 experience, my apologies, you'll probably be disappointed. But I do promise that we have some pretty darn futuristic stuff to share with you that will probably completely transform the way you think about the investment portfolios in Web3 moving forward. So let's get started. I want to introduce a couple of savvy people joining us today, starting with Miko Matsumura, general partner of Gumi Cryptos, the #1 blockchain-focused venture capital firm with offices in Oh, it seems like. Did I just get muted?
Yes, please go on.
Okay.
Yeah, please go on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So I want to introduce a couple of savvy people joining us today, starting with Miko Matsumura, the partner of Gumi Cryptos, the #1 blockchain-focused venture capital firm with offices in Silicon Valley and Japan. Miko is also the host of a popular YouTube podcast channel called Miko Bits that features some of the brightest and most interesting minds and builders of the blockchain industry today. Our warmest welcome to you, Miko. It's delightful to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much.
And of course, the co-founder of Solv Protocol, Yan Meng, or Mike. Once again, it's great to have you back, Mike.
Nice to having me.
I'd also like to introduce another guest, Gary Gao. Gary is from the Solv community, and he's just getting into crypto, DeFi, NFT, and Web3. I heard Gary is a passionate learner of crypto, so hopefully we'll get some fun, thought-provoking questions from him later on. Why don't we quickly go around the group and maybe introduce yourselves to the listeners? Tell us your background and what got you into crypto in the first place. Why don't we start with Miko?
Yeah, sure. So, I've been in open source software for probably about 30 years already here in Silicon Valley. I'm actually in New York today speaking at the Cornell Blockchain Conference, but ordinarily I'm in San Francisco. And, what really happened to me is, I was working on a startup that was in-memory databases. And, my technical co-founder basically just discovered Bitcoin and just started really, he built a Bitcoin node just to see how the protocol worked, and he got really excited about it, so we eventually started a Bitcoin exchange, as everyone does. Eventually I got recruited to be a partner at Gumi Cryptos Capital, where we invested in a number of very important seed stage projects like OpenSea and Yield Guild Gaming. So we're definitely getting, more and more unicorns. I think we have 6 or 7 out of our first fund, and it seems like a new one is born. I think yesterday I just found out another one of our companies, Zanpool, looks like it's headed towards the unicorn status. So it's been a really exciting run. Obviously we're excited backers and supporters of the Solv Protocol. We think this is another major infrastructure, and really will be a huge player in decentralized finance.
Oh, thank you, Miko. It's really wonderful to hear about all those exciting projects that you guys invested in. How about you, Mike?
Yeah, I have a very long story about my career in the crypto, but to cut it short, I first ran into crypto when I worked for IBM, and back to 2015, the new CTO of IBM, now he is the CEO of IBM, um, asked us to learn blockchain and told us that blockchain will be the future of finance and business software. So I push myself to learn the university course from Princeton, and I read a lot of books, and I find myself a more favorite the not the blockchain but the cryptocurrency and the digital assets. So I start my career from that perspective. Yeah. So 7 years from now. And I fortunately to have the opportunity to work with the whole team, especially Ryan Zhou and Will Wang, to start the project, Solv Protocol, at the late 2020. Yeah, basically, this is me.
Awesome. I'm actually a avid reader of Mike's published books. I'm working on. I'm in the middle of reading your book, the book that you wrote. I think a few years back about the this blockchain when you were still a consultant for Tencent. You wrote this book, which is really interesting about blockchain in general. I actually learned a great deal from reading it. So.
Yeah, it's about industrial blockchain.
Nice. Okay, so okay, I think Gary is offline, but we can continue. So since our topic today is focused on Web3 digital assets, I'd like to tell you guys this like this Twitter comment that I came across a few days ago by Guido van Rossum. For those in the audience who don't know who Guido is, he's the creator of Python, one of the most popular programming languages. So basically someone tagged Guido in a Twitter post and asked him what his opinion was on the future of Python in Web3. And I'm sure Guido, gets tagged like a million times a day, and probably saw this one, and then he just decided to sort of go for it. And he said, and I quote here, let Web3 die in a flaming ball of fire. No, that's some pretty incendiary thing to say, no pun intended. And especially coming from someone who's literally been at the frontier of information technology. But still, in all fairness, I think it points to an interesting tension we're seeing today between early internet software developers and the Web3. So and I want to ask Mike, what is going on here? Like, to what extent do you believe Guido's comment on Web3 is justified, if at all?
You started from a very interesting question and a very interesting figure. First, I need to confess that I'm a huge fan of Python programming language. But I don't think Guido, as the father of Python, is the best person to comment on the Web3. I personally know and met Guido in 2007. He was a Google employee then, and was joining a tech conference in Beijing. I was editor-in-chief of CSDN, which was the largest Chinese-speaking developer community. So I had the opportunity to have a one-on-one interview with him, and I asked him a few questions, and he answered. My impression was that he was a very technical person, very focused, and never look around. He is one of, I think, one of the few top programming language expert in the world, but he might not have read a lot about Web3. I mean, I can understand why many people dislike Web3, even I can say hate Web3, because it sounds like it's just another marketing hype, and to some extent, it's truly a marketing. term. So if you judge a book by its cover, you might draw a conclusion that Web3 is a big step down from Web2. The user interface feels stiff to use, and the performance is poor. The game unplayful, uninteresting. Yes, like the Web 1.0 in late 1990s, I think Web3 in the current stage is uninteresting. But so I believe that the technical expert like Guido have a bunch of good reasons to curse Web3, because Web3 doesn't address any traditional technical concerns such as the performance, scalability, programming efficiency. So it's natural that they don't see the merits of Web3. But to me, Web3 has its substance, um, which I think it's all about digital assets. Because in Web3, you as a user can have the initial ownership of the digital assets you created. You can upgrade the digital content you created to digital assets and own them, and you are guaranteed with the freedom of transaction. You can sell it, and you have the right to distribute the value your digital asset create. So I think this is something very profound, though though the significance might not be obvious at a first sight, especially for common users. In Web 2, um, the popular scheme, the popular model is so-called platform economy. So the huge digital platform, they own all the digital contents you created. So so actually, you create the content, you wrote the article, you post a picture, you create the video, but the platform actually own it. It has the control to to hide or delete the content, and it has the platform obtained the value, and the platform decided how to distribute and dispatch the value. So you are actually, in my opinion, the user of Web2 platform are digital slaves to the platform. But in Web3, Web3 changed all of this. It's the first time in human history that we can technically and systematically protect the user's digital assets. So this can help us to build a totally new digital economy. I highly respect Guido, but clearly he is not an expert in things like laws and economics and market economies. So I think it's not a surprise. It's not surprising that he doesn't appreciate Web3, but it doesn't mean that Web3 isn't important. So I still support, and I still believe that Web3 can be the next big thing. Yes.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing that. I think you mentioned a lot of really interesting stuff like ownership in Web3 and the freedom to dispose of the asset that you created freely, and then you also mentioned platform economy. Those are the things that we definitely want to come back and explore more of. But before we move on, I'm actually really curious to see what Miko thinks of this, because I know that prior to the advent of the blockchain, Miko, you spent many decades working in open source software development, and somewhat similar to Guido's lifetime work. And so I'm curious to see your take on Guido's stance on Web3. Do you think he might just be having a bad day on the internet that day, or knowing him and his work, this might come from some sort of long-standing position?
Well, I think change is hard, right? Like I once got a flame mail that was very, I got my start in the Valley as the chief technical evangelist for the Java programming language and platform, and once I actually got a flame mail from Bjarne Sustrup, who is the creator of C++, right? And he was very angry about how terrible Java was, and how Java was ruining everything, and so I definitely understand the impulse of people from one paradigm, that want to resist the other paradigm. I think there is a lot to complain about with Web3. I agree that it is a marketing buzzword. And I think one of the big annoyances that I have is that I don't believe Web 2 exists. So, I think Web 2, people are like, Web 2, when you version number something, you really try to talk about an upgrade, right? And I did not see the web protocols upgraded on a version number. Tim Berners-Lee did not announce Web 2, so there is no Web 2, right? So if there's no Web 2, there's no Web 3. But I'll tell you what I do support is that I think, we definitely got the impression that the Web 2, the position of the user in Web 2 is weaker, right? And I think that's true, but I think that the seizing the bull by the horns, I just think it's just flat out appropriate for us to say that Web 2 is broken, right? Jack Dorsey does not want to run a company called Twitter. He wants to run a company called Block, right? Mark Zuckerberg does not want to run a company called Facebook. He wants to run a company called Meta, right? Because why? Because they can't run away fast enough from the Frankenstein monsters that they created, right? So I think the thing where we have to start with the Web3 conversation is we all have to acknowledge that the incentives, the privacy, the security, basically the best move on Web2 social media is to tell lies that make people angry, right? And that's your best move, and you'll get the most incentives for doing so. Right. So everybody understands that this is really almost like a pure attack on the human limbic system, and that it really pays to be hyper aggressive and antagonistic and, toxic, really. So to me, incentivizing people to behave in this way is very unconstructive. And it really it's a huge spoiler. Right. So, of course, these leaders in technology are all running away from their creations, right? So I think where we have to start with the Web3 conversation is we have to start with the axiom that Web2, whatever it is broken, right? So we have to start there. And, obviously, things like user data privacy, the abuse of users' data and social networks, all of these kind of elements, their content, right, I think relates to the emergence of something new. And I would say that the something new, which we people will call Web3, I think has several elements that have to do with ownership, inclusion, and sort of the formation of tribalism, right? But I would say that the two dimensions are, first of all, ownership, which is financial inclusion. But I think there's even another dimension that goes beyond that, which is narrative inclusion, right? Which is, it's not just about our ownership and our property, but it's also about our story. And I think when you see the NFT revolution, you begin to realize that people want to seize control of their story, and they don't want big companies like even Netflix, which is down almost 30, 50% in their stock price. You don't even want to see them tell you what the story is. People want to control the narrative. They're tired of being passively told to sit back and listen. So, I think this is a bloodless revolution, and people are kind of fed up with the way things are.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you just said. I think that people really have having trouble having I think a lot of people have their own unique perception of what's going on on the internet right now, and you're absolutely right. I think there doesn't have to be this narrative that everybody has to agree upon that, okay, Web 2, Web 3, there's the water, clear watershed moment when, okay, it's kind of like Ethereum, the big merge, Ethereum number 2.0, people are saying, oh, it's going to happen on a specific date, this summer, but it might, I'm not a technology guy, but I think some things are just like happening very silently without like, only time will tell. Like some of the big things that happen in history, only time will tell. Will give a clear definition of what happened in the past. But I think it's really fascinating about the part that you mentioned, the narrative dimension, because but I am curious about your view on the financial dimension, because Mike, in the beginning, has mentioned about ownership and freedom of transaction. I'm really curious, like, what do you think? Are you sympathetic to his version of Web3? Like, assuming Web3 is like this stage of internet that we're in right now. Do you think there's more to that? For Web3 digital assets?
I think the thing that people kind of maybe a little upset about is the hype factor, right? And people may think, oh, Web3 implies that Web3 is as big as Web2, right? But to me, I actually don't think of it that way. And in fact, I don't even think Web2 is a thing, right? So to me, I feel like there's three waves. One wave is Moore's law, which is the doubling of transistor density, right? So that created companies like Apple and Microsoft, and then the second wave was actually Metcalfe's law, which is the network effect, and that created companies like Facebook and all these others, right? So the thing that I think, and Google and the rest, right? So it took. So I believe that comparing this phenomenon to the entire creation of the internet as a whole, and comparing it to the invention of the transistor, is probably a fairer. So I believe this is the third wave of something, but it isn't the third wave of the web. So for me, if you look at the first, if you look at assets and time to the first $1 trillion, right? Like it took Microsoft 44 years to get to the first $1 trillion in enterprise value, right? If you have that, it took Google, which is not of the Moore's law generation, but of the Metcalfe's law generation. It took them 22 years, which is exactly half the time, right? And if you look at Bitcoin, it took about 12 years, which is almost exactly half of that time, right? So, when you look at these wavelets, you're beginning to see that there's sort of a fundamental and seismic change, right? And we believe that the birth of, these value transfer and blockchain consensus protocols is really akin to the size and magnitude of the birth of the internet itself, or the birth of the transistor. So when we count 1, 2, 3, we're not counting web 1, 2, 3. We're counting like technologies 1, 2, 3.
That's really an interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing that with us. I do want to get back to like digital asset. It seems that, and this is a question for Mike. It seems that to you, Mike, digital assets, should, like, they hold such a central and foundational place in your, Web3 worldview. Could you try to break it down for us in a fundamental way that tell us what exactly makes Web3 digital assets so unique?
Yeah. I have been inspired by Miko's arguments and points, but yes, I believe that we are in the middle of something, some profound technical wave. Just we do not know what is the law ruling this new wave, but I think we can have a better, maybe a clearer perspective from the digital assets, because as I just said, for a web user, Web3 digital asset are something the first class of digital asset that you can get and own in your web experiences. I won't compare the Web3 digital assets with its predecessors. Web2 digital contents, because the Web2 digital contents are not asset. You cannot have ownership of it. You can easily copy it from others, and you have no ways to track its transaction. It's simply not any type of assets. But I think we can compare Web3 digital assets to so-called cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ether and USDT and BNB, and as well as the NFT arts, NFT collectibles. I think when we do such comparisons, things are getting more and more interesting. Cryptocurrencies are undoubtedly digital assets, but you can do only, I think, three things to them: mint them, I mean, create them, I mean, mint them, then send them and receive them. So three things: mint, send, and receive. A typical crypto trader usually buy and sell cryptocurrencies, hoping to harvest some profits. That's it. They have, I mean, aside from the three operations, they have no utility. So that's why we call it cryptocurrencies, because in this regard, they are very much like currencies. You can only receive and send, I mean, spend currencies. So you have no currencies have no other functions. Okay. NFT art and collectibles are similar. Certainly you can view them, but view is not a technical function of them. So technically you can only create an NFT and transfer it to others. So it doesn't have other functions. But consider the emerging Web3 digital assets. Seems that they are different. First of all, many of them are NFTs. Second, most of them have a wider range of utilities. Means that you can do more things to them. For example, in Axie, Miko just mentioned Axie. Axie, you need to buy some monsters, and your monsters can fight, right? Can fight and breed. They can give birth to new Axies. And in step N, the popular move to earn Web3 mobile apps today, step N, you can buy, you can own virtual shoes, and you can wear those shoes and run with them, and by that you can earn some tokens. So uh, so in step N, you can virtually wear a pair of shoes. In decentralized, you can build some buildings on a piece of virtual land. So these are typical, Web3 digital assets. They have utilities. I think in like I just said, as I just said, in digital in Web3, we will have a lot of NFT asset, and they have some functionalities. They have some utilities. I think another example is Solv Vouchers. We think that all the Solv Vouchers we are developing and we have developed are type of Web3 digital asset. For example, our first Solv Voucher, vesting voucher. Actually, if you have your vesting voucher sit in your pocket, sit in your wallet, actually it can silently release tokens for you. It can silently and accurately calculate how much token you can claim, and you can claim tokens from it, and you can also split it or merge it into another voucher. So you can do quite a lot of things to a Solv voucher. So that is I think a distinct a definitive or a distinct feature of Web3 digital asset, that you can have a richer set of technical functions so that the user can interact with them in many more ways. So interact here is a keyword. You can interact with Web3 digital assets. Most of them are NFTs. This is something that you know not very. It's not a highlight of the cryptocurrencies or traditional NFT assets. Yes. Okay.
Miko, I see you have a hand sign. Do you want to add
Yeah,
something to that? Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of reinforce a little bit about Solv Protocol and like what we're especially excited about, right? Which is that a feature that you pointed out was that you can basically split something. You can take a token and you can split it, right? So you can split it as many ways as you want, like a pizza, right? But the thing that you can do also is you can merge them back together, right? Which is really interesting, right? So today you have in the Ethereum ecosystem, you have this wonderful standard called ERC20, right? And ERC20 allows you to define fungible tokens, right? AKA tokens, right? And then, the ERC 721 actually allows you to define something called a non-fungible token, right? Which is a token that can't be, split, right? But the thing that I think is very exciting about Solv Protocol is that it defines a capability where you can take something that starts out as a singular unique asset like an NFT, right? And then you can actually split that into components, right? And then you can reassemble those components, right? So I guess what we see here is we see a fundamental technology advancement, right? We don't necessarily see applications that have to be forced into this binary problem of whether things have to be made non-fungible or they have to be made fungible, but we would rather see something that is, I think has been called semi-fungible, right? So I think that's really the key innovation, and on top of this innovation, we're seeing these exciting products like, vouchers.
Yeah, thank you, Miko. Very important.
Yeah, that's definitely that's really awesome what you added to what Mike said. That's like ERC 3525 token standard. For those of you who don't know, is the semi-fungible token standard that allows tokens to. It basically combines like the fungible attributes of ERC 721 and non-fungible attributes of ERC 721 and fungible attributes of ERC 20. And make sure that the token, you can lock the tokens and it belongs to you because it has a unique ID and you can hold it. It's your asset, but at the same time, you're not locked into like idle. Like this asset doesn't have to sit there until in the case of vesting voucher, it doesn't have to. You don't have to wait till the very end for the last token to be popped out in order to claim it. There's a platform for you that's also based on ERC 3525 where you can send the voucher in and list it up for sale. And whoever buys your voucher gets this newly generated voucher with the underlying tokens that they bought, leaving you the original voucher with the remainder of the unsold tokens. I think that's really cool because it really combines. It gives you the security of the asset without losing the liquidity or flexibility of your control over it. Basically, like Mike, you just said, like you mentioned the word interactive a lot, and I think this is one of the keywords that is like we found throughout Solv's narrative. About its products. And I just want to make sure that our listeners understand this concept. And please, Miko and Gary, feel free to jump in like anytime, because it seems like pretty wild to me for an asset to interact with external entities in the world. And like this concept may not be immediately accessible to people hearing it for the first time. Because it sounds like a lot like what robots do, right? Mike, could you maybe break it down for us?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. In fact, in Solve team, we often use the word robot, because we intentionally build various Solve vouchers as the robots living on the blockchain. So, as I just mentioned, a Solve voucher is interactive. So, what means interactive? uh, it means that it's like an account. It can receive and send tokens, and also it can receive and send messages. So this, if you abstract everything, you can see that it's like input and output. And also, a self voucher is also intelligence embedded. Um, I borrowed this term from Miko in a conversation with him. In intelligence embedded, it's actually enclosed a set of smart contract. So if you know something about the in the computer science, you will know that if a digital object can get input and generate output and has some intelligence embedded in it, I mean, it can logically handle the input and generate the output. You can call it an intelligent agent. And robot is a typical class of intelligent agent. So if you look at the Solve instrument voucher, uh, we are developing a new type of voucher called Solve instrument voucher, which is to support the NFT instrument purchase instrument plan. Um, with the support, you can buy expensive NFT. You don't need to do a lump sum payment. You can buy it like you buy a house. You can first place a down payment and then pay installment for say 10 weeks or 12 or 20 weeks. Um, this is very good model for the buyers because it can afford more expensive NFTs. But for sellers, the problem is that if I am the seller, if I was a seller, I can accept the instrument purchase. But if you, as a buyer, violate the contract, if you do not pay the instrument, if you refuse pay the instrument, how can I do to you? Because you, after you pay the down payment, you have already have the NFT, got the NFT. So how can the seller protect his rights? So that's how the Solve instrument voucher step into the sense. We actually, we set up a set of special smart contracts, and you input your original NFT into the contract, and we will generate uh, two NFTs. One we call sellers NFT. The other is buyers NFT, or yeah. So if you listen carefully, what how Miko just described the Solve vouchers. He used a word that we can um, we can split an NFT, split a digital asset into components. So components is a very important word because um, the seller voucher and the buyer voucher are two components regarding to this instrument purchase scenario. The seller voucher actually means that um, the holder who hold the seller voucher can take back the underlying asset, the underlying NFT when the default happens. So if the buyer didn't pay, refuse to pay the instrument, the seller's voucher will turn red. Means that something bad happened, and when a seller voucher turn bad, it's like a robot. If it can sense the status of the contract, and if it found that the contract is violated, it can turn itself red and restore the asset, underlying asset, so that the holder of the seller voucher can have the right to take back, firstly, the underlying NFT from the buyer. So this is one scenario I would like to explain. The seller voucher works very much like a robot, and it's very intelligent. It can receive the instrument payment, and it can also sense the status of the contract, and it can conditionally offer the holder a special right to take back the underlying assets. So do you think it's like a robot, robot? I think it's a typical example that we mimic something intelligent agent in the blockchain and tokenize them. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mike. Yeah. Miko, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I think this is advanced thinking for sure. One of the things that I think started off this whole revolution is, obviously going back to Nick Szabo and smart contracts, right? So when we think about smart contracts, his example of that is like a vending machine, right? So a vending machine itself is a kind of robot, right? It's just a very simple single-purpose robot, right? I think this idea of automation, the idea of intelligent automation, is definitely not outside of the scope of, blockchain.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I also want to add one more thing about what Mike said. I think a lot of people try to understand a robot. It might not seem like might not seem to be a high flown concept at first glance, but I think the idea of having an asset sitting in your wallet that does all these things to you in an automatic fashion, I think it's really cool to me. Being in the community, I hear all about those Solv products every day, but I think it's very rare to hear this kind of innovation that the Solv has in planning in the future. I think just this whole ERC 3525 token standard just have such massive potential in developing a wide array of products that will benefit our economic life in just so many ways. So I just wanted to give Mike a shout out on that. And I was told by Gary that he had a question for Mike. Gary, did you have a question? Sorry, I meant Gary. No?
Seems Gary had lost his connection.
I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah, we can.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Gary.
I'm just gonna try and enter this chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like he's offline right now. But he just sent me, in a DM, this question. This is a question for Mike, and it goes like this. So there are products developed by Solv that have seemingly contrasting functionalities, right? So basically, for example, vesting voucher, convertible voucher, bond voucher all seem to service different groups of customers and have different, like, serve very distinctive use cases. So as someone from the community, it's not obvious to me what the overarching product design philosophy Solv is adopting in the long term. So could you, Mike, talk a little bit about this and explain to us what the ultimate digital asset the Solv protocol is creating? This is Gary's question.
Okay, it's very interesting because I posted a Twitter this morning to address this issue because we have developed 3 different types of vouchers: vesting voucher, convertible voucher, and bond voucher, and we are developing 2 more. And so people asked me, how many vouchers will you develop? And actually, um, Solv is providing a new set of infrastructure so that the third-party developers can develop, I think, dozens of different vouchers with different financial features, financial functions. But yes, we actually cannot let this situation happen. That someday we have 2 dozen or maybe 100 of different vouchers, and nobody know which voucher has any special capabilities, and people will be confused. So as I said in my Twitter post, I think eventually um, uh, Solv will actually invent an omnipotent voucher, or also super voucher. This super voucher have great flexibility, and it can help the common user, to create the specific financial instrument or financial asset he would like, um, with simple configuration. So that means you, as a common user, as a common web user, you can visually interact with the Solv tools, and you can make some customization, and you can get the digital asset that fit your specific needs. So I think we have found the methodology to implement that. We can have 6 or 7 different components. For example, the time components, the interest rate components, the portfolio structure components, and we have 6 or 7 different components, and we can enable the users to freely select and combine these components into a financial instrument, digital financial instrument that can fit his specific needs. So by this way, I believe that we can um, you know um, create one instead of dozens of different vouchers, and these vouchers can help our users to do virtually. I think I wouldn't say all, but I think most of useful financial asset, and cover most useful financial requirements or demands. So this is our overarching uh, theory or thought, but it depends on whether we can, we will see why, how, and when we can implement this. As I said, omnipotent voucher. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I don't know if that answer was satisfactory to to Gary. Is Gary still here? Gary, could you hear us?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Awesome. Does Miko have anything to add to what Mike just said?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this, right? Which is at the base layer, right? You can kind of think about Solv like like a pizza, right? So, you just want to find a way to split it up, right? But I think the thing that makes it a little more complex is that like the things that people are buying and selling are maybe a little bit more complicated than a pizza, right? So, when you talk about things like vesting, right? Like vesting is obviously complicated, and you start to get into the kind of financial dynamics of what people call forward contracts, So again, I think these are like, you get into things that are fairly sophisticated when you start to kind of delve into specific use cases of what people want to do, right? So people get into interesting life situations, right? Like they're like, oh, I'm working for this DAO. I have this tokens. I have vested. I have unvested. I want to buy a house. I need cash. How do I get a cash advance? Like, so in a sense, like, if you're a homeowner, you can try to remortgage your house and get cash out of that. So the thing that's really interesting about these mechanisms, right, is that, while the base mechanism of splitting a pizza is really simple, the idea is that the toppings on the pizza may be a little complicated, right? So, so I would say that like, that's probably some of the source of the confusion. I think the thing that is important to kind of underscore is that I feel like one of the things where you would have a huge kind of research and opportunity to innovate is, I think we should discuss a little bit more about kind of the user interface level, right? Where it just becomes more clear, kind of from a visualization perspective, what the parameters are and what exactly people are buying and selling.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed that Ryan is also listening in this Twitter space. So I don't know whether Ryan want to add something to our arguments. No, I think
He's probably away right now.
okay. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
definitely. Yeah. Nico just gave us very very bright suggestion and advice. Yes, we definitely should look into this. Both the user experiences, the interface, and how to make things more simple, much easier to understand. But basically, I believe that what we are doing is um, special important to Web3 because as I just mentioned, I think the Web3 digital asset will have a rich set of functionalities, and I think what Solv is trying to do is to find a way to help the users, not by coding, just by configuration, to create um, the Web3 digital asset with desirable financial functions, um, with a single, with visual operations, a click and some easy to learn skills. So this is what we are trying to do, and I believe that this is very important for Web3. Yes.
really it's just like about using existing components for like users can just mix and match to create like this financial solution that suits their like that suits their financial needs the best, right, Mike?
Yes.
Right. I do want to comment. I guess pose a question to what Miko just said. I think it's really a really interesting point, an important one. Obviously, Solv is like creating a series of like sophisticated financial instruments, and complex financial instruments are by default not easily accessible to common people. Usually people use bank for for getting to get paid, to save money, to deposit some money. All those high level investment products are not being used by the majority of people. But what I'm thinking, I think I'm thinking about something else when you're talking about Solv. I think about like DeFi as a whole, and how how easily adopted it is, because I consider myself as I wouldn't say an expert on technology, on IT, but I'm somewhat more tech savvy than most people I know. But it still took me a while to get my hands around DeFi, all kinds of protocols, and ways to protect my asset in my wallet, and the different ways to store seed phrases. And I just feel like in general, DeFi has this learning curve that is too flat, I guess, or steep. What I'm trying to say is there's definitely a learning curve for a lot of people. Do you see DeFi being adopted by the masses in the long run, or it will remain a kind of platform or a space only available to a small group of people in our society? This question is for Nico.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of this has to do with interfaces, right? And, when you think about like later this afternoon, I'll be meeting up with the CEO of Celsius Network, which is another one of our early stage portfolio companies and unicorns. And, for example, if you look at what they're doing, they're delivering DeFi yield to users, right? But the users are actually just downloading an app, right? So in essence, like, people are already quote unquote using DeFi. They're getting the benefits of DeFi, and they're not having to kind of, learn how to do like, complex governance, or anything kind of impossible, right? So, in a sense, like a lot of this just has to do with kind of the risk reward, and it has to do with kind of the willingness of people to seek alpha, by kind of increasing risk, right? And obviously, the way people successfully do that is without hurting themselves is knowledge, right? So, I think Andre Kranya, the famous creator of Y-Earn ecosystem, and now kind of DeFi pundit, he famously said that DeFi is really just money flowing from those who don't know towards those who know, right? So, in a sense, like that's a very hyper aggressive approach, right? Because if somebody hacks you, they're the one who knows, right? And so, if somebody rug pulls, they're the one who knows, right? So in a sense, this kind of framing is a really dangerous framing, and it's not a particularly warm and fuzzy framing, right? But if you look at it from that perspective, then it behooves people who want to seek fortune, to become knowledgeable, right? So in a sense, like we're still in the Wild West phase where if you want to travel west, right? Like I think we're right in the middle phase. Like I think the railroads have been invented, right? So if you want to go west, you can go on a train, right? Like you can go on something like Celsius. You can have a pretty easy time in the West, right? As long as you don't go outside of Denver, and you can go there and have an omelet, right? So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that like, we're kind of in the early stages of how the West was won. I feel like if you just go there without knowing anything and go to the most dangerous places, yes, you can get bit by a rattlesnake or you can get shot by a bandit.
Yeah, definitely. That's really a really
Interesting
nice analogy.
metaphor.
Yeah.
Interesting metaphor.
Definitely like to me, like the entry barriers definitely there. You need some kind of like base knowledge to at least like overcome the barrier to actually start learning. But I think the silver lining of all this is that it's a free world that you can you can learn to do this if you just make the choice to do it. I mean, the choice is yours. I think that's definitely like that's the silver lining of all this. And I like sometimes I like to think that this is, and a lot of people are mentioning this. We're still like in early phase, like where it's like kind of the equivalent of email in the 90s. And then I think a lot of people back then in tech are probably worrying, well, like what if the world is never going to be ready for this technology? But then I mean, until it was, right? So I guess the bottom line is what we'll just build what we can build with the resource we have at hand, and then let time work out the rest of it.
Yeah, and I think in a way, like, people talk about how DeFi is going to replace things like venture capital, and I definitely get the impulse. I love that there are incredible ways for everyone to participate, but I think one of the things that is important to understand about something like venture capital is that, like, we do this all the time. Like, this is our full-time job. Like, this is all we do, right? So, like, if you look at the Wild West, obviously the bartender has a shotgun behind the bar, because the bartender can suddenly become law enforcement, but like,
Right,
but there's also a sheriff, right? And the sheriff ideally knows how to handle a gun, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, if you want to go to a dangerous place and expose yourself to risk, like, you should have skills, and I think, the thing that is really nice about the DeFi movement, right, is that the DeFi movement is exactly as you say. It is open, right? I think one of the dangers of it is that it's open, right? And what I mean by one of the dangers is that, it's really nice that anybody can go to the most dangerous place in the West and get into a gunfight, but, is that always the best possible thing for every single person to go get in a gunfight in the Wild West? Probably not. Like, there may be people who may want to stay in the safety of a bigger town, so, like, so I would say, but to me, like, that's how people make their fortune, right? And so to me, like, this is the place. Like, I think Metacovan, the buyer of the world's most expensive NFT, which was the Beeple art, $69 million worth of Ethereum, he said that crypto is the new America, right? So in a way, like, if you think about the mythology and story of America, it's really the place where people go, to kind of seek their fortunes, right? So in a sense, like, this is, really a beautiful framing. It's very interesting, and I would say that, like, if you look at the mythology of America, there's this entire concept of the westward expansion, which kind of culminated in sort of the moonshot, right? Which is sort of like the final frontier, right? So, it feels like this idea of people needing a frontier. I think DeFi has produced one. So now we have a new frontier, and people can go there, to seek their fortune, and incredible things can happen. Obviously, people can also be, bad things can happen too, right? So, I think this is this is why it's important to be well informed, and I really appreciate people hanging in and listening to this call, because I do think that everyone here is trying to reason about this and trying to understand how they can benefit or enjoy or otherwise educate themselves. So I think hats off to all of you.
Yeah, definitely. That was really, really inspiring. I'm definitely taking out a lot of what you said into and make it into my next pep talk for the Solv community.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yep. Okay. Does anybody from Mike, you're saying something? Did you say something?
No. I think
Okay.
it's a very good talk, and I
Awesome.
learned a lot from Miko and you.
Oh, I learned a lot from both of you guys. And okay, so does anybody from the listener, from the audience, have any questions for the two speakers of the call today? Gary, did you? Yeah,
Hi,
go ahead.
yeah. Thanks. So, I actually have a question for Miko. Now that my network is working, so Miko, I really appreciated your talk and your observation on and your opinions on Web2 and Web3. I actually quite agree with you that there is no Web3. Like we're still enhancing and improving this internet. So, and I understand that your company, Booming Cryptos, has invested in many blockchain teams.
Hey, Johnny, I cannot hear anything.
Okay, Gary, keep going.
Can you guys?
Yeah, I think it's.
I will repeat the question to you, Mike. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah.
Yes, please.
Gary, please go ahead.
Yeah. Right. So, my question is, so as an investor in this area, so what's your number one excitement or drive? Like what excites you the most about being an investor in this space? And what is the emerging area or like the new trends in the blockchain industry you find most intriguing?
So if you go to the website miko.com, miko.com, right, what you'll see above the fold is you'll see a tagline, right? And the tagline is something along the lines that open source financial infrastructure will make the world more fair, just, inclusive, transparent, and these are kind of the values that I espouse that really reflect my personal adventure, right? So for me, the thing that I'm kind of most excited about is being invited onto the adventures of the people who have the greatest conviction, right? And those are the entrepreneurs, right? So entrepreneurs, are the ones with the conviction, right? They're the ones with the gumption, the bravery, the courage, the ideas, the inspiration. So for me, when I think about like what I'm excited about really specifically, obviously like Solv Protocol is a beautiful example. When we think about, infrastructure that relates to DeFi and NFT, we invested in Lit Protocol, Solv Protocol, OpenSea, so we have an entire sort of portfolio. We just did something with re-NFT, which is NFT rental. So we're absolutely very bullish on, basically infrastructure, that really creates developer functionality in the form of a platform, right? So we think this is essential platform infrastructure, and that kind of stuff goes all the way back to, the Java platform, developer tools, and developer platforms, right? So I'm definitely excited about developer platforms, because I believe that these tools really create a degree of inclusivity, openness, freedom, so that the properties of these systems, I think, really support, I think, a better world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very inspiring.
Yeah, very good points.
Mike. Yes.
Miko.
Yeah, that's very ennobling and very inspiring. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? We're running like really behind because of the technological mix up in the beginning. Does anyone else have a question for? We'll take one more question and then. No. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you, Miko, Mike, and Gary for this educational, entertaining, and really inspiring evening. A lot of great messages, a lot of leadership from you guys that I really admire. Thank you so much for tuning in. To all the listeners, this is our bi-weekly Twitter Space call, and please give our Twitter account a follow, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank
Wonderful.
you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Miko.
thanks for having me.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you,
Johnny.
guys.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.